Hey guys, how you doing? Barb here. Um, I'm gonna go over the Richard Allen case. He was sentenced, and just gonna go over some things that have happened. Um, and this is gonna be a little bit longer of a video than what I normally do. So, if you want to hear about them, stick around. So a jury of 5 men and 7 women found Richard Allen guilty of 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of felony murder in the highly publicized Delphi murder trial. Now, felony murder is a criminal law exception that allows a defendant to be charged with first-degree murder for a killing that occurs during a dangerous felony, even if the defendant is not the killer. Now, prosecutors say 52-year-old Richard Allen killed 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German in 2017, cutting their throats and leaving their bodies near a trail in Delphi, Indiana. The case went cold for more than 5 years until Richard Allen was arrested in 2022. The jury spent about 19 hours deliberating before reaching a verdict. Regardless of what the verdict is, people aren't going to be happy. Before the verdict, to keep their composure, Richard Allen sat emotionless as the guilty verdict was read. His lawyers comforted him as he was handcuffed and led from the courtroom. Boo-hoo. There was a gasp, followed by a quiet sobs from the member of Libby's family after the guilty verdict on the first murder charge was announced. Libby's mother, Harry German Timmons, hugged the woman sitting next to her. After everyone was allowed to leave, Libby's relatives stayed to hug and thank Carroll County Prosecutor Nicholas McLeland. Members of Allen's family stood in a corner near the courtroom door, surrounding and consoling his wife, Kathy Allen. Outside the courthouse, people began to scream, "Guilty." Sure enough, everyone has retreated to their silos. Outside the courthouse, those who believe Allen was guilty are relieved justice was served. And those who believe Allen has been railroaded while the real killers are at large are angry and in disbelief. Indeed, Allen's supporters seem to be already gearing up for the next phase of the legal fight. A lengthy appeals process within hours of the verdict, a website called Justice for Rick Allen began circulating on social media. Now, I have not looked that up yet, but I do want to. If you guys seen it, leave some comments down below. I'd like to hear about it. The judge left the gag order restricting involved parties from speaking on the case in place until Allen is sentenced on December 20th, which happened. Allen could be sentenced up to 130 years in prison, which he was, thank goodness. Crying as she left the courthouse, Libby's grandmother, Becky Patty, hugged family members. Now, the crowd outside erupted into applause and cheers outside the courtroom after the guilty verdict was announced. Some spectators held signs showing their support for Allen, while others expressed their desire for a guilty verdict. Allen's wife, Kathy Allen, stated, "This isn't over at all." Don't know what she meant by that. The 12-person jury, which had been sequestered during the trial, began deliberating on Thursday afternoon after 17 days of testimony. The judge instructed them to deliberate from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday until they reached a verdict. The judge gave the jury their final instructions and urged them to consider the facts before Nick McLeland, the county prosecutor who delivered closing arguments, walking the jury through the evidence and testimony presented during the trial. McLeland told the jury, I believe the evidence is firmly convincing that Richard Allen is Bridge Guy and killed Abby and Libby, referring to a video taken from Libby's phone showing a man walking down the Monon High Bridge trail. Now, Delphi law enforcement have long held the belief that Bridge Guy shown in the video is the main suspect in the case. McLeland showed jurors graphic photos of the girls' bodies, the Bridge Guy video, which he said captured the final moments of the girls' lives, and a recording of Allen reportedly confessing to his wife during a phone call from prison. He could be heard telling his wife, "I did it. I killed Abby and Libby." Defense attorney Brad Rossi, in closing arguments, said a broken timeline, false confessions, and a lack of DNA or weapons evidence should lead to acquittal. False confessions, my ass. There was like 60 some confessions they caught him doing. You don't falsely confess to something 60 freaking times. There was no damn false confession. It's bullshit. The defense trusts what you've heard over the past several weeks is more important than what you're hearing today. The defense further argued no physical evidence ties Allen to the killings and said confessions he made in the past were false and stemmed from being in solitary confinement for months as his mental health deteriorated. The Delphi murder case goes back to February 13th, 2017, when Abby and Libby went for a hike on the Monon High Bridge in Delphi. The two girls were reported missing after they failed to meet Libby's father that afternoon. The next day, their bodies were found, both dead from cuts to the throat and partially covered in sticks. The case attracted public attention in part because of the video and audio recording of a suspect taken from Libby's smartphone. That was very smart of her. That is what made this case. The video shows a man walking on the bridge with his hands in his pockets, and the audio includes a Mars muffled voice saying, "Guys, down the hill." Although police circulated the audio and still photo from the video just days after the killings and identified the Bridge Guy as their prime suspect, the case ran cold for more than 5 years. Allen had seemingly evaded police, staying in the small town of Delphi and working at a local CVS pharmacy until a clerk digitizing tips related to the investigation in September 2022 noticed Allen had placed himself at the scene of the crime. You know what's I don't have in here, but I have read this in the past, that he supposedly developed photos for one of the girls' families and didn't blink an eye when they came to pick up these photos. And as well as some bar or tavern or restaurant or something that him and his wife always went to and hung out at, there was supposedly a wanted poster with the picture of the Bridge Guy, and which I think he looks very, very similar to. And this supposedly was hung up on the wall, like right where they used to sit. And nobody brought attention to the fact that he looked like that photo. I don't know, guys. I can't believe his wife that whole time. This case has been seen everywhere on the news. And you're going to tell me that she didn't recognize her own husband in that video? Bullshit. I don't believe it. Just days after the bodies were discovered, Allen told police he had been on the trail during the time frame the girls were thought to have been killed. Carroll County Sheriff Tony Liggett said despite the tip, Allen got lost in the cracks. Around a month after the tip was discovered, Allen was arrested after police matched an unspent cartridge found between the girls' bodies to a pistol recovered from his home during a police search. After Allen was arrested on October 26, 2022, he was charged with 2 counts of murder while committing or attempting to commit a kidnapping 5 days later. Prosecutors later amended the charges to include 2 additional murder counts. Over the course of the trial, the prosecution highlighted Allen's dozens of confessions while incarcerated. He confessed to the crime more than 60 times, including to his wife, his mother, the psychologist who treated him, and the warden and other prison employees and inmates. So he falsely confessed it every time to every one of those people? No, that's bullshit. They played audio recordings of some of the confessions for the jury. Monica Walla, the former lead psychologist at Westville Correctional Facility, where Allen was housed, testified he initially told her he was innocent, but began confessing to the crimes in April of 2023, around the time he was placed back on suicide watch. Wada testified Allen had told her, "I killed Abby and Libby. I'm sorry." He said he originally planned to sexually assault the victims, but ran away when he saw a van nearby and he had cut the girls' throats, covered their bodies with sticks. That vehicle belonged to Brad Weber, who lives near the trail and who told jurors he was coming home from work in his white van at around 2:30 p.m. on February 13th, 2017. That van, McLeland reiterated to jurors during his closing arguments, was a detail only the killer would know. Who else would know there was a van there that scared him away? Only the killer. The defense has sought to paint a portrait of Allen as a mentally ill man whose fragile mental state was exacerbated by months spent in solitary confinement, including during the time period when he confessed to the crimes. He was twice put on suicide watch while in prison, exhibited bizarre behavior such as eating his own feces and banging his head, and was at one time diagnosed with a brief psychotic disorder. Who the fuck eats their own feces? Oh my God. Testifying for the defense, Deanna Dwanger, a clinical psychologist who worked for Indiana Department of Corrections Behavioral Health, testified Allen was diagnosed with a serious mental illness in April of 2023, and a team of mental health professionals concluded he had a grave disability. That poor guy. Right. The defense originally hoped to introduce an Odinism defense, a theory that followers of Odinism, a Norse pagan religion recently adopted by white supremacists, committed the killings, saying the girls were killed during a sacrificial ritual in the woods. The defense put together an explosive 136-page memoranda laying out what they believed to be compelling evidence pointing to Odinism. They argued that sticks and branches were arranged on the girls' bodies, and a tedder was painted on a tree using Libby's blood to resemble Odinist runes and symbols. They put forth names of purported Odinists who they say are viable suspects in the case, including a Logan Sport man whose son dated Abby and who the defense alleged post cryptic images on social media resembling the crime scene. I didn't see any of that. I don't know. I didn't look for it either. If any of you have seen it, post about it down below. I'd love to hear about it. During a pretrial hearing in August, a former Indiana State Police detective who investigated the Odinism angle testified that Brad Holder's social media posts are not a coincidence. At the same hearing, an expert called by the defense testified that the teens' deaths are textbook examples of a ritualistic murder. But ultimately, none of these were enough to convince Judge Gall that jurors needed to hear about Odinism. She ruled that presenting such evidence would only cause confusion and could potentially mislead the jury. Oh my goodness. Hang on one second, guys. All right. In his appeal, Allen could resurrect the issue of judicial bias, that Gall was not a neutral arbiter, but a judge who has shown explicit favoritism of the prosecution. That basically is what the defense thought hamstrung them, and they couldn't present the narrative they wanted. There were still gaps that could not be filled. It's thought that's going to be a central focus of their appeal. As the testimonies began last month, Judge Gall also ruled that jurors would not see the two widely circulated composite sketches that police released in 2017 and 2019, siding with the Carroll County prosecutor Nicholas McLeland that the artistic renderings were based on witnesses who described a variety of facial features but noted they were not certain of their identifications. Defense attorneys argued that the sketches showing two different men, neither of which resemble Allen, are highly relevant. I don't agree with that. I think the one sketch looks very, very, very much like Allen. I think the most appealable issue is that his attorneys attempted to bring in the fact that there were other possible suspects in the case, and Judge Gall refused to allow that, said defense attorney Jeffrey Mendez, who's been following the case. The incriminating statements that Allen made while awaiting a trial at Westville Correctional Facility, there wasn't any DNA of Allen's at the scene of the crime, and none of Libby's or Abby's DNA was found on items recovered from his home. That's meaningless. Prosecutors drew attention to the .40 caliber unspent round found by the girls' bodies, which prosecution expert testified matched Allen's pistol. So, if he didn't do it, how did his bullet get out there by the bodies? It just magically flew out there? The defense cast doubt on the bullet evidence, questioning why more images were not taken of the cartridge and suggesting the bullet could have come from a law enforcement officer's weapon. The prosecution has also tried to match Allen with the video and audio recording of the bridge guy captured on Libby's cell phone. Now, Indiana State Police Master Trooper Brian Harshman, who said he listened to more than 700 of Allen's prison phone calls, testified for the prosecution it is his opinion the voice of Bridge Guy is the voice of Richard Allen. Richard Allen is Bridge Guy. He kidnapped them and later murdered them. In response, Rozzi said Allen was not clearly identified by witnesses as the man on the hiking trail or the bridge when the teenagers went missing. He also pointed out Allen still lived in Delphi for more than 5 years after the girls were killed. So what? That doesn't mean he didn't do it. He had every chance to run, but he didn't because he didn't do it. Well, I'm sorry. How was he going to convince his wife, let's sell the house and move, just up and because he knew he was guilty, he thought maybe he could convince his wife to move? That's bullshit. You just don't up and, well, normal people. He's not normal, I guess. Anyway. Before Allen's trial, his defense attorneys tried to keep his statements from being presented to jurors, arguing they were made involuntary and in the throes of severe mental health crisis while in solitary confinement. But Judge Gall decided to allow the statements to be presented to jurors, ruling that the conditions of Allen's pretrial detention were not intended to force confessions from him. Questions about whether those statements, many of which Allen made while receiving antipsychotic medication, should have been admitted into evidence and will most likely be raised on appeal. Another issue that could be raised is Gall's decision to block a metallurgist from testifying. Dr. William Tobin's testimony was meant to change the statements, finding that a bullet cartridge found 6 inches from Abby's feet had been cycled through Allen's Sig Sauer model P26 .40 caliber handgun. Prosecutors argued that while Tobin is a recognized expert in metallurgy, a field that studies metallic elements, he is not a firearms expert. He has no training in firearms identification and has never conducted firearm examinations before. Once you let that forensic evidence in, not allowing the metallurgist to testify becomes an issue. The verdict is an affirmation of the years-long and at times criticized law enforcement investigation of the girls' murder. Although it may provide some closure for their families, the jury's decision is unlikely to be the end of the case. Allen is scheduled to be sentenced on December 20th, 2024, in that same courtroom. Special Judge Fran Gall from the Fort Wayne will consider a pre-sentence report, listen to the victim impact statements of the families of the children who were murdered, and give Allen and his family the chance to speak for themselves, and will then pronounce sentence and advise the convicted man of his rights to appeal the jury's decision. She will explain the basis for her sentence, what she thinks the aggravators and the mitigators are, and what she gives the greatest weight to, but ultimately at the end of the sentencing phase, she will explain to him what his appellate rights are, ask him if he wants to seek an appeal, and if he wants an attorney appointed, and then go with his wishes. I'm sure that will be a yes to appeal and a yes to have someone appointed. His attorneys Andrew Baldwin and Bradley Rossi have made a record of filings indicating they expect an appeal that may be based on the judge's gag order from the start of their representation, her attempt to have them fired, and the court's denial of motions deemed essential to the defense of their client. So the things that you appeal are the things that the defense asked to be able to do but weren't allowed to. To visit the scene, for instance, introduce Odinism, all the things they objected to the state doing, but the state was allowed to do. You're looking at how the case was shaped by the evidence that was not allowed, and you're trying to say to this jury didn't see the right picture, the correct picture, to come to a correct verdict. Even though Judge Gall banned the televising of the trial, despite the presence of cameras wrapped in trash bags in the courtroom, the media will once again file a motion to broadcast the sentencing. In this case, if this case had been televised, I think a lot of what we saw from the jury would have remained the same. They were sequestered, and I don't think we would have seen a whole lot different from the jury. Even though nearly all states permit live and video coverage of criminals, the most prominent example, the telecast of the O.J. Simpson's trial in Los Angeles in 1995, led to some judges to rethink the presence of cameras in the courtroom. And you saw the lawyers and the judge in that case acting and behaving differently in front of the camera, making different types of rulings in front of the camera. And that's all been documented from 30 years ago. And I hope that people involved in this case are above that and learned from that. So, that's it, guys. This guy's sickening. He very heartlessly did what he did that day and thought he got away with it. For 5 years, he got away with it. And I don't think his sentence was harsh at all. I think it is exactly what the family needed. And I hope he rots there for a very long time. Leave your thoughts down below. Any questions you may have. That's all I have for you today. If you haven't done so already, do me a huge favor. Please subscribe to my channel. I would appreciate it. It helps me out. Hit the thumbs up button and that notification bell so that you know the next time I upload a video. Until next time, guys, peace.